sir, he gets mashed. And that is going to be the ball game. 6, 5, 4, 3. They can't snap it. They can't stop it. They can't win it. Alabama wins the ball game.
Darian Thomas, linebacker, Alabama.
He was a nightmare for people that had to try to prepare for him because he had unique skills.
Just go get the quarterback. I felt sorry for some of those poor tackles that came in and had to go against him because they didn't realize what they were getting themselves into.
Hey, baby, let's go out there like a bunch of crazy dogs, have some fun.
John, I got to do better than this.
Lights out.
Sacking the cornerback is just like you devastate a city, or you cream a multitude of people. I mean, it's just like you put all the offensive players in one bag, and I just take a baseball bat and beat on the bag. So each time he came over there, I tried to tear his damn head off.
Let's play some football. Let's play some football.
The pressure is on. This is Off the Edge on Tide 100.9.
Focus on what you want to do, what you want to accomplish. Think about that. Don't think about how you feel, how tired you are, how hot it is. You got to push yourself on the field like when you're playing football.
It's my honor to present the National Championship Trophy to Coach Nick Saban and the Alabama Crimson Tide.
To me, this is the ultimate team. All these guys bought into everything they needed to do to be the best players that they could be. There's more togetherness on this team than almost any team that we've ever had. And they had to overcome and persevere so much adversity through this season, and they've done it magnificently. And I'm so proud of this group for what they've been able to accomplish and going undefeated and winning the national championship.
Streaming live on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and the Tide 100.9 app. Here is your host of Off the Edge, Jacob Harrison.
Your man overthrown. Spit out the ball.
Hello there, good morning. Welcome into Off the Edge, Tide 100.9, your home for Alabama Crimson Tide Sports. I am Jacob Harrison. Thanks so much for hanging out with us here on a Thursday morning as we prepare for the final few comments from SEC Media Days. Brian Harson's coming up next. We got the guys out in Arkansas up right now, so we'll dive into the Auburn Tigers, what we've got, to expect from those guys across the state in West Georgia, a little bit later in the show. But we'll definitely dive into this whole deal with the Oklahoma Sooners and the Texas Longhorns potentially being interested in joining the SEC. Before I get to that, you know the drill. The show, as always, streams live on the Tide 100.9 app. Download that boy onto your Android or Apple device and soak in all of the great content that we have for you there, whether it's written or on the air. We've got you covered. It's also available on your smart home speaker. Just tell Google or Alexa to enable the Tide 100.9 app or skill. Also stream the show live on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube. So give us a like, share, and subscribe if you're there. Leave a comment in the comment section of your stream as well, and we'll take your questions and comments there. You can always call into the show, 205-342-9904. No guests today, so we'll dive straight into it with Oklahoma and Texas potentially being interested in joining the SEC. Now, it's a bizarre situation, right? The news kind of breaks right in the middle of the SEC Media Days yesterday, shortly after Nick Saban gets off the podium and Jimbo Fisher takes his place on the podium. What's interesting to me is, first of all, a few comments. Greg Sankey says, I don't have any comment on that speculation. I'm here to talk about the 2021 season. Texas says, Speculation always swirls around collegiate athletics. We will not address rumors or speculation. Oklahoma says the college athletics landscape is shifting constantly. We don't address every anonymous rumor. None of these things deny what's going on. So when all the reports say there's fire to this situation, it's just a matter of time. It may be a few weeks before we hear something official, or it may be a few years before something official finally happens. Regardless, we're in that spot now where super conferences are coming. They are coming. You can shake your head. You can get upset about it. You may not like it. And you know what? I'm not sure if I'll like it in the end. Outside of the fact that we get good football, it might be a pain if there's too many bad teams within those situations. But I think Texas and Oklahoma coming to the SEC is nothing but a good thing. As Jimbo Fisher said when he was asked the question shortly after the news broke, I bet they would. I bet they would want to come to the SEC. We got the greatest league in ball. That's what Jimbo Fisher says. He also says, I'm just worried about Texas A&M. And the Texas A&M AD says, no, thank you. No, we're not interested. We want to be the only SEC program from the state of Texas. So when it comes down to that, as we know from Texas A&M and Missouri's entrance into the league, you do need a 3/4 vote from the teams of the league to approve it. Well, you already know you're getting a no from Texas A&M. They're not crazy about this idea at all. They've benefited way too much from being in the SEC. Just look at their recruiting numbers, the way that they skyrocketed into the national scene. I know they haven't made the playoffs. I know they haven't been a fixture within the SEC championship realm either, but they've given Alabama fits. They've given LSU fits. They've been there, right? They're right on the cusp, and they don't need something getting in the way, such as a Texas Longhorns program, a former rival, or an Oklahoma Sooners program, a former rival, stepping on their territory and making it difficult for them to continue that success. So it'd be a hard no from them. Also, look at Missouri. Missouri would potentially have to move to the SEC West if that were the case, which they would not want to do. And it would mean that they would have to play Texas and Oklahoma every year, which they also would not want to do. Understandably so. From a competitive standpoint, you don't want every single game to be a ridiculous murderer's row. And that's what you would be getting with Oklahoma and Texas. Now, from an Alabama standpoint, there's a few different ways that this could potentially work. The SEC network suggested maybe there would be 4 pods or 4 divisions within the SEC. I'm not crazy about that idea, but that would keep Alabama away from Texas and Oklahoma, or Alabama and Auburn could move to the East to make room for Texas and Oklahoma. Who knows? But when it comes down to it, Alabama is prepared for such a challenge. Alabama, it says, bring them on. If you will sign the dotted line to play us on the football field, we'll play you and we'll kick your ass. And if you win, congratulations. See you next year. That's the way Alabama approaches it. And I feel like most of the fan base would probably agree with that. So at the end of the day, this is nothing but a good thing for Alabama. If you ask me, it provides opportunity for more good football. That's why I'm in favor of the college football playoff, is because I want good football. I want exciting football. I want drama-filled football. I don't want to go into every single week knowing that Alabama's going to win by 50. It makes what I do just that little bit less exciting, right? Because when we get to week 2 and the home opener against Mercer, we're going to talk more about fans and the experience and the road back from COVID and all these other great stories. But we're not going to talk about the Mercer Bears at all, because that's futile, because Alabama's winning that game 63-4, right? Or 3. You can't score 4. But that's the point, is I want good football. I want exciting football. And if there's more teams in the conference, that means you got to play more conference games. Nick Saban kind of gets his way in that regard as well. There's something to be gained from bringing in Oklahoma or Texas or any Power 5 team for that matter. What I would like to see, if these super conferences are indeed going to come, is for it to happen across the board, honestly, is for something universal to happen to where we just split the Power 5 and the Group of 5, and it just makes sense on a ground level. The average fan understands what's going on, and whether it's the ACC, the SEC, the Big Ten, and the Pac-12, all just form 16-team super leagues, and the best of the best are allowed in and the worst of the worst are out. And I understand it's not all about football. The reason Vanderbilt's in the SEC is because of academics and their ability in baseball. But outside of that, why else do you keep them around? Because Arkansas is good in every other sport. Missouri is pretty good in most sports. South Carolina is good in every other sport. You see what, like, it's not all about just football. So all of those sorts of things come in together as well. But if you're supposed to choose between Texas and Vanderbilt, or you're supposed to choose between Oklahoma and Missouri, we all know who you're going to pick because it's going to give you more money. It's going to give you more in TV revenue. And it's going to provide more excitement for your fans, which means they'll actually want to buy a ticket and go to Bryant-Denny Stadium or cross the country and go to Texas and watch the Crimson Tide play in Austin, or go to Norman and watch the Crimson Tide play in Oklahoma. All of these are positive aspects, but lo and behold, our producer, Bryant Horn, who's hanging out in there with Joe Gaither and Palmer McCall, you're the heel, man, and you don't like fun.
No, I know that this is just the nature of conferences, and I know divisions only really matter in football because basketball, softball, every other sport for the most part, unless I'm forgetting one, just operates on the conference level. There's no real divisions, but adding Texas and Oklahoma would destroy the divisions, which, I like being able to play Mississippi schools and LSU every year, not just because we beat up on some of them, because that's, I'm not scared of competition. I'm more worried about because it just doesn't make sense geographically, because then you start to see Alabama having to travel to Columbia, South Carolina for division games. You see them having to travel down to Gainesville, Florida for division games. It doesn't make sense. And you can't split it north and south because all the power resides in the South. So, it just doesn't work. Maybe you go to whenever the Big Ten added Nebraska and Iowa, they go to like a legend. What would they call it? Legends and Leaders?
Legends and
Which
Leaders.
was the stupidest idea I've ever seen. But maybe something like that. I guess you kind of slightly have that in the ACC with the Atlantic and the Coastal divisions, but that's still kind of north and south.
Yeah. ACC's divisions make no sense.
And I know that the realignment of the conference, which would have to happen, it's not as simple as just adding 2 teams into the West and putting 2 teams into the East. It's not that simple. And I know that this is a job for someone much smarter than I, because believe it or not, I don't hold a master's in conference realignment. I know. No. But it's just so fragile. It's like having to divide an atom. It's not going to end well.
Anything worth doing, Bryant Horn, is difficult.
Yeah, I know.
Anything worth doing.
And it just, and look, I love parity in college football. I think we're on a step in the right direction whenever it comes to getting representation from G5 schools and other schools that deserve a shot at the playoff. You and I talk about this every single week on Saturday Morning Showdown. And if Texas and Oklahoma join the SEC, then all these other teams are down the river without a paddle. Because then you start to see an SEC that could send an Alabama team, like a Georgia team, a Texas team maybe, or an Oklahoma team. All these teams going to the playoff representing the SEC. Undefeated Cincinnati gets screwed, man. It kills.
Not if Cincinnati can go to the Big Ten. Let Cincinnati go to the Big Ten.
The Big Ten is not going to get Cincinnati.
Why not?
Because they're too small.
Says who?
Because they're just too small. They're not a well-known, they're fine.
Rutgers is terrible.
Yeah, I know, but
at everything.
Rutgers is one of the founding members of the Big Ten, right?
No. Rutgers was added about the same time that all the conference realignment happened.
It just, I don't know. It just does not make sense. And because I don't want to see a split between G5 and Power 5, because then you're just dividing even more.
Not if you can bring them up.
You start to see a model that looks like the English soccer system. There's like 1 million divisions. It's stupid.
Because there's 1 million teams. There's 130 teams, Bryant. I don't feel bad for Mexico State that they don't have a chance because they're bad.
But what about the teams that are on the up and up?
Then bring them up. That's what I just said. You said no, they're too small.
Well,
if they're too small, then sorry, you're just going to have to be the best group of 5 schools.
Okay.
Because why doesn't North Dakota State come up?
Because they dominate to the FCS level. Why would they want to come up?
But they're big enough. That's a big school in Fargo.
Look, I mean, okay, the NFL has around, I'd say, probably the perfect amount of teams, right? 32.
Right.
Now, even if you subdivide G5 into a lower program, which I don't even know what they would be called.
G5.
G5? All right.
I guess. I don't
that's
care.
still too many teams to get accurate representation.
I disagree. I wholeheartedly disagree, because you still look at the way that we allow 64 teams into a college basketball tournament.
Basketball is different, though.
I know it's different, but like all Division I schools are eligible for that. And what determines whether or not you're a Division I school?
Look, I know this is a straw man fallacy at this point, but
it is.
But like, if you add Texas and Oklahoma to the SEC, then you might as well divide it like the NFL into conferences and then divisions or something like that.
Why not?
Okay,
if it works, it works.
Look, I mean, I know it takes time, but that's more feasible and looks better than having a 16-team super conference, and then the Big Ten, which actually has not 10 teams, and then the ACC and the
Big Ten already has 12 teams. The Big 12 has 10 teams.
Yeah, I know.
And they're about to have 8.
Yeah, Big Ten has 12, which, by the way, you got to change your name at this point.
Oh, they can't because of branding, all that sort of stuff. But
I know, but that's a good investment.
But all of that comes down to, like I said, anything worth doing is difficult. And when it comes down to it, it's best for the sport. All this evolution that's going on, it's best for the sport. It is good for the long term of the sport. Yes, because of the money, because of the notoriety, because of the TV deals. Because college football right now, that's where we focus here. With college football, it's still a regional aspect. We have hundreds of thousands of fans, millions of fans in this region that thinks that the Pac-12 is not a good representation of what Division I college football is, and that's an inaccurate assumption. Now, granted, they don't have an elite program, and that is accurate information.
Which I think ebbs and flows. Like, it's only a matter of time before Oregon or USC or Washington or, hell, Arizona rises to the cream of the crop, and then they are a program, you know? I mean, everything ebbs and flows in sports in general.
Exactly. And that, in the end, provides the ebbs and flows. Because now it makes sense when you've got 40, 50 schools that are actually vying for one goal, and you win your conference, you do what X, Y, and Z, you go to the playoffs. There's actually opportunity there. But like I said, you can move Cincinnati, you can move UCF, you can move Boise State, all of these sorts of things. It may sound unfeasible simply because it's something that you previously could only do in a video game that no longer exists. But at the end of the day, it's still something that's feasible. And if they're terrible, they're terrible. Somebody's got to be bad in that situation. And I don't feel bad for teams that are bad.
I'll give you 2 teams that I think, now they're not money makers like Texas and Oklahoma, which is, we've already established that's the main reason that the SEC would bring them in. But 2 teams that make sense, that wouldn't destroy the world of college football as we know it, because then you have to see another conference trying to go get teams to fill their spots. Honestly, I know that they've denied it in the past, but you got to take Florida State and you got to take NC State, because then you expand yourself to Raleigh and then you put yourself deeper into Florida. I think NC State and Florida State would be much better options. I know that Texas and Oklahoma are blue blood college football programs and they would bring in so much money, but like, I don't know. I think those 2 teams make a lot more sense.
You would never get it. It would never happen.
Yeah, I know they're perfectly content in the ACC.
Chance.
I know.
And so, but that's the thing, is you can still have the SEC, you can still have the ACC, the Big Ten, the Pac-12, and have a perfect marriage that makes sense. And again, like I'm saying, conference realignment. Like I'm concerned with putting the best product on the field, the best product on television, and allowing everybody to eat and make money, and for the sport to grow in popularity. Because at the end of the day, college football, very popular in Alabama, very skewed on what it is nationally. Nationally, it doesn't hold a candle to the NFL. It's more on par with the NBA. So at the same, you have got to formulate situations to make more money for yourselves. Why not just allow the best of the best to be out there and formulate schedules, formulate whatever it is you need to do to make that work and profit off of it. because at the end of the day, you're losing. You're not gaining any ground on the NFL. You're not gaining any ground where it matters, and that's what you need. This is a national scope thing, not an SEC scope thing. We're looking at it the wrong way. And whether or not it's smaller schools moving up, which we've seen happen when TCU moved up to the Big 12, and technically when we saw Missouri move to the SEC, it's not all about making sense, because Missouri in the SEC doesn't make sense to begin with, and they've been here for 10 years, and they're not going anywhere.
I agree.
So I'm not worried about geography, because at the end of the day, the most Southeastern team is Miami. You don't get more Southeastern than that. And nobody's saying, well, let's bring the Hurricanes into the SEC.
Well, it's about culture. I mean, I think it's about the culture.
Culture?
Yeah, because all Big Ten teams, now I know it's not a scientific term to say the word vibe, but all SEC teams have the same vibe. All Big Ten teams, for the most part, have the same vibe. ACC, Pac-12, they all have the same.
Do you think Midwestern vibe is that much different than Southeastern?
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. I mean, no. Yes.
They just wear more cowboy hats in Texas. That's the only difference, man.
Well, that's a whole nother animal, because I know we have to get to break soon, but I want to talk about the rest of the Big 12, because then you start to see all these teams like Baylor,
screw
Texas
them.
Tech.
I ain't concerned.
Okay, yes, I know, screw them, but where do they go?
I don't care. If you're not good, you're not good.
And also, I got to put this out there before we get to break. I know that's just like a small, fun little talking point with the recent news that broke, but the pod system is a stupid idea. It's so dumb.
We'll touch on the pod system. Okay. We'll take a break. We'll come back. First, I got to tell you, before we do go to break, the show, as always, is brought to you by Alabama Vintage at Alabama VTG on the Instagram. AlabamaVTG.com is where you can find the online store. Go check Charlie out at 2210 University Boulevard, under the Crimson Awning, across from City Hall in the heart of downtown T-Town. He's got the hookup for you, whether you need vintage T-shirts to commemorate past Alabama victories, jerseys, jackets, hats, shoes. He's got it all, plus the memorabilia that you can deck out your house with, or your man cave, your lady cave, your gaming room, whatever you need. Charlie's got the hookup for you, as well as follow them on Instagram. That's the place where you can find the newest items in inventory, as well as hook up with the brand ambassadors there at Alabama Vintage. Get those codes for 15% off at AlabamaVTG.com. I'm Jacob Harrison. This is Off the Edge. We'll be right back for more here on Tide 100.9, your home for Alabama sports.
The YMCA of Tuscaloosa and Boys and Girls Clubs of West Alabama are partnering with Buffalo Rock and Target for Operation Backpack July 6th through August 8th. The YMCA and Boys and Girls Clubs of West Alabama wants to make sure that children in Tuscaloosa have the tools they need to succeed this school year. Items being collected are notebook paper, crayons, markers, scissors, glue sticks, folders, Kleenex, and more. Drop-off locations for this back-to-school backpack drive will be Target, Downtown YMCA, Boys and Girls Club of West Alabama, and the Benjamin Barnes YMCA. The YMCA of Tuscaloosa and Boys and Girls Clubs of West Alabama are partnering with Buffalo Rock and Target for Operation Backpack July 6th through August 8th. The YMCA and Boys and Girls Clubs of West Alabama wants to make sure that children in Tuscaloosa have the tools they need to succeed this school year. Items being collected are notebook paper, crayons, markers, scissors, glue sticks, folders, Kleenex, and more. Drop-off locations for this back-to-school backpack drive will be Target, Downtown YMCA, Boys and Girls Club of West Alabama, and the Benjamin Barnes YMCA.
Touchdown! Alabama wins! The Alabama football countdown clock is driven by Crawford Insurance, Tuscaloosa's low-cost auto insurer. Call 752-6489 for a free quote today.
Roll Tide! Roll Tide!
There are 44 days until Alabama football.
Streaming only on Peacock.
What do you know about Dr. Dunch? He was charming, intelligent.
My patients mean everything to me.
Based on the unbelievable true story.
I can't make sense of it.
Dunch has 2 deaths that we know of. The state of Texas has executed people for less.
It's like he knew what he was supposed to do, and he did the exact opposite.
Dr. Death, starring Joshua Jackson with Christian Slater and Alec Baldwin.
I am going to fix you.
All episodes streaming now, only on Peacock.
Tide 100.9 Tuscaloosa weather.
A mixture of clouds and sunshine this afternoon. We're expecting scattered to numerous showers and thunderstorms through tonight. The high today 87, tonight's low 73. Tomorrow, partially sunny, scattered storms developing during the day. The high at 89. I'm James Spann on the ABC 3340 Weather Center on Tide 100.9. It's 86 degrees in Tuscaloosa.
Follow Off the Edge on Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube for live streams and instant analysis. Off the Edge with Jacob Harrison continues.
We're back here on Off the Edge, Tide 100.9. A little bit of breaking news for you from the Tuscaloosa thread. The city of Tuscaloosa has planned a special parade to celebrate the new Knicks Kids Foundation Avenue in Tuscaloosa with a special parade scheduled for Thursday, August 5th. More information there at TuscaloosaThread.com. They've got Bo Nix up on the SEC network. We'll dive into the Auburn Tigers and what we can expect from them a little bit later in the show. 205-342-9904, the number to call. You can always join the show. We're guest free today. Talking about Texas and Oklahoma potentially joining the SEC. Now, of course, whether or not you like that idea, all reports indicate there's fire behind this. The overwhelming idea is that there won't be enough votes to block it from happening. It may take some time. This isn't something that will happen this year by any means. And likely won't happen next year either, but we are in the throes of college sports evolution, not only with NIL, but the college football playoffs as well. There's a lot of takes coming out from this, including bring them in and just remove the SEC from the NCAA. There are plenty of different directions to go. All takes are welcome. I, at the end of the day, think that it's a good thing, but going with the 14 pods that the SEC network, which first of all, you've got to stop and say, well, if the SEC network is suggesting this 14 pods, the SEC is in control of the network. The people at the SEC network should know a little bit about this situation and might have an inclination as to what this might look like at the end of the road. Now, of course, as I said, this is something that'll take a lot of time. You know, we can think back to just this year. The NCAA had a great idea for how to handle NIL, and then a week before NIL was supposed to be implemented, they threw their hands up and said, screw that, we're just not going to be involved. So who knows what could happen within the time it takes to get, this breaking news out of the way and actually put the Sooners and the Longhorns in the conference. But 14 pods, the way that it's suggested, is geographical. It's Pod A, Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, South Carolina. Pod B, Alabama, Auburn, Tennessee, Vanderbilt. Pod C, LSU, Mississippi State, Ole Miss, and Texas A&M. And Pod D, Arkansas, Missouri, Oklahoma, and Texas. The 9-game conference schedule format would include playing the 3 other teams in your pod every single season, play 2 games against each of the other pods, and host every single team at least once every 4 seasons. Now, that's something that needs to happen now. That needs to happen yesterday. Making sure that if you play 4 years at a program, you will play against every other team in the conference at your house and at theirs. That's just common sense.
Fully agree.
It is absolutely insane that it has been this long since the Alabama Crimson Tide has went to Gainesville. It's unacceptable. That has to be solved. And that goes back to the article that Joe Gaither posed on Tide109.com. Do you get rid of Tennessee, or do you keep Tennessee and just add another conference game, kick out one of these cupcake games, and formulate something around that schedule? I think that's closer to what needs to happen. I'm here for more conference games altogether. But Bryant, you said that you're not crazy about Oklahoma and Texas because of the geography surrounding the question, but you hate the pods, and it's all geographical. Where are you? What's your deal?
So the pods, right? I know that's okay. I find it similar to World Cup group play or Olympic group play. You got to have 2 pretty good teams and then 2 teams that aren't super great. You got to even out the powers a little bit, because it would not make sense to have Oklahoma, Texas, LSU, and Alabama all in the pod together, right? Maybe I just need to look at it and try to divide it up better, but it just it doesn't make sense, because Alabama would beat Vanderbilt every single year. They would beat Tennessee at the rate that this is going every single year. They're probably going to beat Auburn at more than half of the years. It's just such an easy path.
Have you looked at the SEC West? Have you looked at the SEC East? Alabama beats Mississippi State every year.
Yeah,
Alabama beats Arkansas. Arkansas has not beaten Alabama as long as Nick Saban has been here.
I know.
Alabama has beaten Tennessee every year that Nick Saban has been here.
I just feel like there has
Florida
to be a
and
better
Georgia
way
have
than
dominated
pods.
the SEC East.
There has to be a better way than pods.
Sure, maybe there is. I don't know. I'm just saying, like, there's no perfect parity in college sports. It will never exist. Even with the playoffs, even with NIL, all these sorts of things, nothing plays into the idea of parity. I've said it 1,000 times. I don't care if you suck. That's your problem. Get on our level. if you're bad, if you're losing every year, that's your fault. Stop losing. Get better. Recruit better. Do what you've got to do. Stop sucking. I'm not going to feel bad for whoever's in the pod with Alabama. That's your fault. Maybe 20 years from now, when Nick Saban isn't the head coach at Alabama, maybe you can strike then and maybe find one little gold nugget. I doubt it, but I'm not feeling bad for anybody that's got to lose to Alabama year in and year out, because I don't feel bad for Mississippi State now. I don't feel bad for Vanderbilt now. I don't feel bad for Ole Miss on occasion. I don't feel bad for Arkansas, Tennessee. I don't care. That's their fault. And you want to be real about it. We're talking about the SEC, and we're also saying, the SEC where it matters more. And sure, that goes across all sports. But if we're focusing in on football, which is what we do on the show, then why do we act like an SEC schedule is so difficult for Alabama? Because it's not. Because you still have to play Arkansas every year. You still have to play Mississippi State every year. You still have to play Tennessee every year. That's 3 easy games, not to mention the 4 easy out-of-conference games that you have a year. That's half your schedule. You're already bowl eligible. Now you got to play LSU, who's down right now. You got to play Auburn, who's down right now. And then cross-rival, you get Florida and Georgia these past 2 years, but, that's an anomaly. Over the next 6 years, you're not going to have to deal with those 2 teams in the regular season. And then Texas A&M, who's perennially pretty good, but still hasn't beaten Alabama since 2012. So I'm not at all, I know Alabama's on a level of their own, but adding Texas and Oklahoma isn't going to add to the parity. But I'm not concerned with parity. I've said that every single time the college football playoff discussion comes up. I don't care about parity. I just want the teams that are up there to have an opportunity, and the opportunity for more good football, better TV ratings, better TV deals, improving the sport as a whole. It hasn't bothered me over the past 10 years over the past 20 years that the New England Patriots have been in half the Super Bowls. I know it bothers other people because they don't like greatness, Bryant Horn, but I'm not at all, because I don't care about the parity. I wish my team were there every single year. So why the hell should I be upset when another team is able to pull it off outside of the fact that it's not my team? Parity is great. I love parity. I love seeing the Miami Dolphins go from absolutely terrible to mathematically being eliminated from the playoffs this past year. That's great. But the Dolphins did that because at the end of the day, they added a playoff spot in the NFL, and the Dolphins still didn't make the playoffs. But the Dolphins were the ones that made themselves better and got better over a period of time, and it finally showed up last year, and they were just short of the playoffs. Nobody helped them get to that spot. It's not college football's responsibility. It's not the NCAA's responsibility. It's not ESPN's responsibility, the SEC's responsibility to make any team better or to have better opportunities. You have all the opportunities you need because you're a Division I program. You are a Power 5 program. So if Texas and Oklahoma come in and we create this super league, and then it has to happen all over the country so that we have 4 super leagues of 16 teams, and we have to move some of these group of 5 schools up and some of these Power 5 schools down, looking at you, Vanderbilt and Duke, then not Duke because of basketball. I'm sorry. I didn't mean that.
Vanderbilt beats baseball.
That's baseball, dude.
Baseball is a rising college sport.
But what else are they good at? Because the argument I made earlier.
Duke good at?
I don't know.
Cross.
Because I don't watch ACC.
Yeah, exactly.
Anything. But when it comes down to it, baseball doesn't make the kind of money that basketball does, and basketball doesn't make the kind of money that football does. So while all the other sports encompass the decision, football's the moneymaker, and you got to follow the football. We'll take a break. I'm Jacob Harrison. We'll come back and we'll get off the discussion of Texas and Oklahoma unless you call in at 205-342-9904. Posted a lengthy column last night on Tide 100.9 about the evolution of Nick Saban over the past 13 years. We'll dive into that next here on Off the Edge. Tide 100.9, your home for Alabama sports.
We're planning a trip to Spain later this year.
But our Spanish is...
It's pretty bad. So we're using Babbel.
Babbel's conversation-based method teaches you real-life words and phrases. And with Babbel's interactive, bite-sized lessons, you'll remember what you learned.
There's no easier way to learn another language.
Ahora hablamos español.
He just said, now we speak Spanish.
Babbel, language for life. Now try Babbel for free. Just go to Babbel.com. That's Babbel.com.
Attention business owners, if your biggest question is, how can I find more customers? Then Town Square can help. Go to mylocalcustomers.com for a free competitive analysis that will show you how the most successful businesses grow and how you can do it too. These strategies are simple and we can show you how to apply them to your business. Be one of the first businesses to sign up and you'll receive $500 in free advertising on this radio station. Visit mylocalcustomers.com. That's mylocalcustomers.com.
Crawford Insurance and Child Abuse Prevention Services presents the 28th Nightlight Golf Tournament at Tall Pines Golf Course Friday, August 6th. Registration begins at 3 p.m. and tee-off is at 4. $125 per player or $500 for a team of 4. Early registration starts today. Go to www.capstuscaloosa.com or call 205-758-1159. The Crawford Insurance and Child Abuse Prevention Services 28th Annual Nightlight Golf Tournament is sponsored by Town Square Media, Buffalo Rock, Tony Brown of Precious Memories, and Michael McComb, Allstate Agency.
This is a big deal. Now at healthcare.gov, millions more people can get affordable health coverage. Due to the COVID relief law, 4 out of 5 customers can get a plan for under $10 a month with financial help. From doctor visits to preventive services to prescription drugs, these are quality plans. You can do this. You can have coverage as soon as August 1st if you sign up now at healthcare.gov. Paid for by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services.
We aren't going anywhere. Off the Edge is available in the podcast center on Tide100.9.com.
In case you missed it yesterday, Christian Barmore, the second-round draft pick for the New England Patriots, signed his rookie deal yesterday evening. You can read up about that there at Tide109.com. If we got some time there at the end of the show, we'll discuss what Barmore brings to the Patriots defensive line, because he's not like anything that Bill Belichick usually brings to his defense. But I do want to kind of circle back to yesterday with some things that Nick Saban said. I felt like a lot of the things that he said pointed back to evolving over time. And he never used the word evolve. He never really insinuated that, this was some sort of theme. It's what I gathered out of it, and I columnized it, editorialized it there at Tide109.com. Nick Saban's advantage is constant evolution. Appreciate you going and checking that out there on the website or on the Tide 109 app. But when it comes down to it, that's the impression that I got is you look at the way the sport has evolved since 2007 when Nick Saban was brought in. Back when linebackers were 250 pounds and nose tackles were 330 pounds. And it was all about the lower man wins, brute force, run the damn football, make their asses quit. All the monikers that came out of that era of football. It's evolved, right? Now it's about speed and athleticism. It's about offensive coordinators and their scheming ability. It's about, who can recruit better and who can develop their players, not who's just a physical freak. Now, physical freaks will take you a long way, as we know that. They play their role for certain, but you still have to develop those players and you still have to make it work. So, Saban had to evolve with that sort of thing on multiple fronts. First, you look at the offense. Defense is kind of screwed from the get-go because of the rules. But when it comes down to the offense, how Alabama, was a ground and pound, one back, follow the fullback kind of system, very pro style within that era. And now they've kind of evolved into the new pro style, which is, utilizing screens, utilizing RPOs, utilizing speed and athleticism and deceptiveness to circumvent what the defense is trying to do to you. I don't know about you, but when I played, it was about the defense imposing its will on the offense, not allowing the offense to do what they know that they're trying to do. That's always been the offense's advantage, is They know the routes they're going to run. They know their assignments on who they're going to block. Quarterback knows what his reads are. The running back knows whose hip he's following, those sorts of things. Whereas defenses were always reactionary outside of certain different types of blitz calls, right? Certain types of zone drops. And when it comes down to it, that's kind of evolved now. Now it's offenses imposing their will, but it's through speed and athleticism and scheming. And that worked against Nick Saban a little bit. As the speed caught up and the schemes caught up, you look at what Clemson did, Ohio State, and Ole Miss here within the conference, derailing Crimson Tide seasons there in the mid-2010s. Nick Saban kind of had to take that approach of, if you can't beat him, you got to join him. And he talked about it yesterday when they brought in Lane Kiffin. Lane Kiffin was the same way. He came from pro-style offenses as well. He ran similar schemes. And when it came down to it, when he came here, Saban said, Lane Kiffin, you've got to come up with this new offense. We're seeing what Ole Miss is doing to us. We're seeing what these schools are doing to us. We've got to rebuild this offense from the ground up, utilize what's being used against us, and make it work. And he's got to do that with Blake Sims as his quarterback, but he's got Amari Cooper, as a wide receiver to come in and really utilize something brand new. And of course, while Lane Kiffin's here, he still gets Derrick Henry. So it's not like ground and pound went completely out of the door, but it became more about utilizing the skill sets of the players around you rather than this is what we're going to do and you're going to fit our box. Whether you're a square peg and this is a round hole or not, you're going to do what this offense contains. Now, that's still similar to what's kind of going on right now, but it's not some impossible task, right? It still fluctuates with the skills of the players. We're still not going to line Devontae Smith up at X and tell him, if they're in press coverage, you got to get out of it. No, we're gonna motion him. We're gonna utilize his skill set. Same thing with Jalen Waddle and all these sorts of guys. We're gonna make you fit within the realm of this offense because it's flexible and it can utilize your skill set. But then on the flip side of that, once that starts going, and even still, with Bill O'Brien coming in this year, Saban said, we're not changing the offensive scheme, the terminology, all of those sorts of things. So Bill O'Brien's been running his offense for the past 14 years as an offensive coordinator and head coach between the Patriots, Penn State, and Houston Texans. And now he's going to run Alabama's offense. This is Alabama's offense. It doesn't belong to an offensive coordinator. It doesn't belong to Sark or Lane Kiffin or whoever else. And it belongs to Alabama and Nick Saban. This is the ideology. This is the philosophy that they want to run on offense. So Bill O'Brien had to, we heard the story. Mac Jones taught Bill O'Brien the offense, and now that's what's going to be implemented with Bryce Young under center and whoever else is to follow, whether it's Ty Simpson or Arch Manning or Jalen Milroe or whoever, right? But on the other side of that, another thing that was plaguing the Alabama Crimson Tide was injuries. Look how injuries derailed Dylan Moses' career. Look at all the injuries that this team has had to face over the years. And last year, injuries were down 50%, and they were soft tissue injuries. You don't want soft tissue injuries, don't get me wrong, but like at least being able to cut those injuries. And he did it by doing something that has not really been embraced by football on the whole. We talk about analytics and how, there's a certain age range where, it's like, oh yeah, analytics, all about it. Then there's another age range that's like, we'll utilize analytics, but we're not living off of analytics. And then there's another age range that's like, analytics, bro, I'm calling the game. What are you talking about? I don't need a computer's help. So when we get to the strength and conditioning, though, adding in Dr. Matt Ray and David Ballou and completely overhauling what the strength and conditioning program is and using science and technology and all of those different things, you see a brand new style with what Nick Saban is able to pull off in his program. Players are healthier, players are faster, players are more explosive, players are better athletes all the way around. You see Evan Neal do a split box jump 10, for however high that was off the ground. And you understand like that's incredible. And that's possible because of the strength and conditioning program at Alabama and what they put into these athletes and what they get out of them using GPS systems and all of this other technology that works. And instead of doing meathead programs in the weight rooms and doing, sprints and all this other sort of stuff, you can utilize technology to get the most out of your players. And that is an effective evolution from Nick Saban. You couple the offense with that, and you kind of get this broad picture of how we talk about it a lot when it comes down to the playoffs and how Saban said, well, if you do that, this, the bowls aren't going to matter. Well, the bowls don't matter now. They're participation trophies, right? He was right. When he looks to the transfer portal, he wasn't crazy about the idea. And he said, but if you go with it, I'm going to lose some players, but I'm going to get really good players too. We saw that this year with Henry To'oto and Jameson Williams. Both those guys are going to contribute this year. Nick Saban's usually one step ahead, right? Now he was a little behind on these evolutions, right? He had to learn a little bit, and he did, right? And he did it effectively. Once all these things sort of come together, he's able to explode on the scene and take home championships and all those sorts of things. So now when it comes to NIL, and this was kind of a question that Joe had yesterday, did Saban kind of sidestep the NIL question? Was he a little too removed from his answer in that question? And I think the answer is no. And the reason why is because, first of all, it doesn't matter whether or not Bryce Young is actually that close to 7 figures, because there's a lot of speculation that he's really not, because we haven't heard about it. And I don't know about all that. Access to Alabama is very, very limited. A lot of people nationally don't really understand that. But at the same time, like, he could have 750,000 or 540,000, and that's very close to 7 figures when you compare it to 100,000. So at the end of the day, what he said on Tuesday concerning Bryce Young's NIL earnings, it's not imperative that he continues the conversation on that. He used it as a recruiting tactic, threw it out there, move on. It's irrelevant now, because now he can step back and he can look at NIL and analyze it on the whole. He's absolutely right. As annoying of an answer as it can be to somebody that wants to really hear what Nick Saban thinks about this massive overnight shift in college sports, it's really the right approach, is to just sit back, see what happens, see where the gray areas fill in. Greg Sankey says he wants a federal blanket over this whole thing and believes that eventually we'll get it. Then why say anything about the situation of where it's at now with so many questions in the air, with so many gray areas? Why not just sit back and analyze it, use what you can to your benefit, and see where this whole thing goes? And then by the time next year rolls around, we've got a lot more information, and we've seen how certain things have played out. Maybe we have a federal blanket law over this whole thing. Maybe Oklahoma and Texas are a part of the SEC conference, and a lot of things have turned on their heads within a year. He's absolutely right. You could talk about all of these things and just be totally wrong, and you don't want to do that. You want to sound like the smartest guy in the room, because you are the smartest guy in the room. You sit back and you analyze things and you let them come to you. And that's why I don't try to, I heard this the other day or read this the other day on Twitter, and I really liked it. Because of what social media is, we think everything has to come with a hot take instead of commentary. Like, Texas and Oklahoma announced that are reported to be interested in joining the SEC. Well, we all have to formulate a hot take right away, right? Because we got sports radio to do, we got podcasts to do, we got TV shows to do, yada yada yada. We got Twitter accounts to appease, yada yada yada, right? And all that's viable, all that makes sense. And hey, I'm in the business of sports radio too. I'd formulate a take and understand it, but I was afforded the opportunity, unlike Ryan Fowler yesterday, where it broke on the air, where you can sit back and analyze it and look at it and say, okay, here's the negatives, here's the positives, here's what I like, here's what I don't like, here's what would work, here's what wouldn't work, and here's why it's a good thing, here's why it's a bad thing, yada yada. And you can sound, reasonable, right? Rather than just saying, I hate it, or I love it. No, this is great. Woohoo, let's do it. Tomorrow, yes. The ability to just commentate on something happening and then formalizing analysis of it, as something Nick Saban does on such a brilliant level. And it's something that surpasses a lot of us, because we're so used to just taking in the information, circulating it in our head for 2 rounds, and then spitting out what we think about it, rather than soaking it in and really, living in it for a second and understanding what value it brings to you, what negatives it brings to you, and formulating a plan of operation with it and against it in order to profit off of the situation the absolute best you can. That's what Nick Saban does better than anyone in the world. That's why he's hoisted 7 national championships within 2 decades. Like, that's what separates him from everybody else on the face of this planet. We're going to take a break. We'll come back. close her down with a little bit of Auburn analysis as we await the new head coach of the Auburn Tigers, Brian Harsin, to take the podium in Hoover as the final coach of SEC Media Days. I'm Jacob Harrison. This is Off the Edge, Tide 100.9, your home for Alabama Crimson Tide sports.
Before the action begins, make sure your bets are in. Every hit.
This ball is crushed.
Every point.
Who are they giving to? Touchdown!
Sportsbook at Golden Moon Casino revolutionizes the fan experience. On your phone, casino kiosk, at the Timeout Lounge. Don't just be a fan. Be a player. Be a winner. Get to Sportsbook at Golden Moon Casino. We're not just fans. We're here to play.
We're planning a trip to Spain later this year.
But our Spanish
is pretty bad. So we're using Babbel.
Babbel's conversation-based method teaches you real-life words and phrases. And with Babbel's interactive bite-sized lessons, you'll remember what you learned.
There's no easier way to learn another language.
Ahora hablamos español.
He just said, now we speak Spanish.
Babbel, language for life. Now try Babbel for free. Just go to Babbel.com. That's Babbel.com.
Attention business owners, if your biggest question is, how can I find more customers? Then Town Square can help. Go to mylocalcustomers.com for a free competitive analysis that will show you how the most successful businesses grow and how you can do it too. These strategies are simple and we can show you how to apply them to your business. Be one of the first businesses to sign up and you'll receive $500 in free advertising on this radio station. Visit mylocalcustomers.com. That's mylocalcustomers.com.
Tide 100.9 Tuscaloosa weather.
A mixture of clouds and sunshine this afternoon. We're expecting scattered to numerous showers and thunderstorms through tonight. The high today 87, tonight's low 73. Tomorrow, partially sunny, scattered storms developing during the day. The high at 89. I'm James Spann on the ABC 3340 Weather Center on Tide 100.9. It's 86 degrees in Tuscaloosa.
You're listening to Off the Edge on Tide 100.9.
We're back here on Off the Edge, Tide 100.9, your home for Alabama Crimson Tide sports. Thanks so much for hanging out with us here on a Thursday as we get closer to your lunch hour. Jay Barker Show is coming up next from 12 to 2, and then Ryan Fowler will take you from 2 until 6. That'll actually take you home today because it is a Thursday. So we're awaiting new Auburn head football coach Brian Harsin to take the podium for the final time here at SEC Media Days in Hoover. And I wanted to get a quick outlook on Auburn before we hear what Brian Harsin has to say. Of course, he'll be asked about Nick Saban.
They stink.
Oh, I'm going to touch on that in a second. Of course, he's going to get talk about Nick Saban and Alabama. He's going to get asked about Gus Malzahn, the offensive changes, the defensive changes, because there's a lot of personnel turnover. He'll be asked about Bo Nix and all these other sort of kind of obvious things that we expect coaches to be asked at an SEC Media Day. So why not actually just look at the team for what it is right now, get a kind of general understanding of what that team is bringing to the table, and then, then focus on what he's going to say. Then focus on the coachy answers that he's going to give. And, we could do what like Bryant did and say, oh, they stink. Oh, they're terrible because they're always bad. And yada, yada, yada. Well,
I don't actually think that.
Yeah, they've beaten us half as many times. So I'm not, I've done it before. I'll do it again. Auburn is terrible. Boo Auburn, but, we're going to actually look at what they've got. What are they doing? What is Auburn doing? Why is Auburn the way they are right now? Why are there so many question marks around Brian Harsin? Well, he's got a new offense coordinator and defensive coordinator, and Mike Bobo is going to have to reinvent this offense from a high school offense that while innovative, is completely ineffective in the SEC, as self-evident by Gus Malzahn's career record in the SEC, to a more pro-style attack. Now, that does mean that they'll throw the ball plenty and they'll run the ball plenty. It'll be a more balanced attack, but that does not mean anymore that it's going to be I formations and power football. That's not what that means at all. They're still going to lean on Tanks Bigsby because that's their best player, but can Mike Bobo really develop Bo Nix within one offseason to make him a viable threat in the SEC? I very much doubt that. I very much doubt that within 2 years you can fix all the problems that Gus Malzahn left for Bo Nix. Bo Nix has tools, and had he been developed early on, then maybe he would be able to take advantage of those tools. But as it stands right now, he's not a good quarterback. He's not an awful quarterback, but he is not a good quarterback. And one offseason does not a great quarterback make, even for a guy like Mike Bobo. However, they are, like I said, they're going to lean on Tanks Bigsby, and they return all of their offensive linemen, 4 of which are seniors, and the best player is a sophomore, and that's Keandre Jones. So we'll have to look at them as well. Defensively, Derek Mason comes in from Vanderbilt, takes over a young defense, which is still going to be led by Smoke Monday at safety and cornerback Roger McCreary, who are 2 of the best defensive backs in not only in the SEC, but also in all of college football. They'll run primarily a 3-4 zone base. You won't see them quite as often trying to match up with the better athletes that reside in the SEC, both in the West and in the East. But their schedule is easy. And we can laugh about that. They're gonna fail their way to a 7-5 record or an 8-4 record or whatever. But their schedule is easy, and that might actually play to their full advantage. Maybe they'll gain some confidence and they'll ultimately preserve that Auburn juju that they have at Jordan-Hare Stadium. Who knows? But will Brian Harsin be enough? Ryan Fowler calls him the Wikipedia coach, and I don't think he's terribly wrong. You can't pick him out of a lineup. You have no idea what he looks like. You know that he's a hard-nosed guy. You know that he's got this strongman personality. But is it enough? Nobody knows, man. Nobody knows what kind of impact he can have on the recruiting scene, what value he really brings to the Auburn program as a national threat. Remember, that's what Auburn thinks that they're capable of, is being a national threat. They think they can sit up here at the big boys table with Alabama. It's Brian Harsin's job to prove them right. And if he can't do it, he'll be the next guy out, and they'll have to do it all over again, which only brings you further and further away. Big thanks to Alabama Vintage. Big thanks to Bryant Horn, Palmer McCall, Joe Gaither, and the whole crew here at Tide 100.9. We'll be back tomorrow at 11 a.m. for more Off the Edge on Tide 100.9, your home for Alabama sports.